Welcome back to the Central PA Property Talk podcast. I'm Brian with 717 Home Buyers, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris. Today, we're tackling a question that almost every homeowner thinks about, but not everyone asks out loud.
Yeah, this is a big one. A lot of people are wondering, how does a cash buyer actually come up with their offer? Like, what goes into that number?
Exactly, because from the outside, it can feel like the number just appears out of nowhere, but in reality, there's a very specific process behind it.
So let's start there. If someone calls you from Lancaster, York, or Harrisburg and says, "Can you make me an offer?" what actually happens next?
Great question. The first thing we're doing is figuring out what the property could realistically sell for in today's market, if it were fully updated. That's what we call the after repair value, or ARV.
So that's basically the best case value of the house if everything was fixed up, right?
Exactly. And we're not guessing, we're looking at real comparable sales in that neighborhood, what similar homes have actually sold for recently. And that matters a lot here across central Pennsylvania, because values can vary quite a bit between Lancaster, York, Harrisburg, and even block to block.
Okay, so step one is figuring out what the house could be worth. What comes next?
Step 2 is estimating the cost of repairs. And this is where a lot of homeowners are surprised. We're not just talking about paint and carpet. We're looking at the full scope: roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, foundation, everything that might come up during a renovation.
So even the stuff people don't always see right away.
Exactly. Because when we buy a house, we're taking on that responsibility.
All right, so now you've got the potential value and the repair costs. How does that turn into an actual offer?
Let's walk through a simple example, just to make this real. Let's say there's a homeowner, we'll call her Lisa, in York. Her house, fully updated, might sell for around $250,000 based on recent sales.
Okay.
Now, let's say the property needs about $40,000 in repairs. Maybe the roof is older, the kitchen hasn't been updated in years, and there are some structural items to address.
Pretty common scenario.
Very common. So now you take that $250,000 and subtract the $40,000 in repairs. That brings you to around $210,000.
So is that the offer?
Not quite, because from there, we also have to factor in holding costs and resale expenses.
Break that down a little.
Sure, while we own the property, we're covering taxes, insurance, utilities, and the cost of capital, plus the time it takes to renovate and resell. Depending on the project, that could be another $20,000 to $30,000.
So now you're somewhere around the $180,000 or so.
Right, and then there's also a margin for risk because not every project goes exactly as planned.
So where does that usually land?
In a scenario like this, that's how you start getting into a realistic range for what a cash offer might look like. Maybe somewhere in that $170,000 to $185,000 range. But, and this part is really important, every property is different.
Yeah, that seems like the key point.
It really is. Across central Pennsylvania, we see offers vary quite a bit depending on location, condition, layout, and how much work is needed. Some properties come in higher than that range, and some come in lower. This is just a simplified example to show how the process works.
So it's not a formula where every house gets the same percentage.
Exactly. It's not one size fits all.
Now, let's talk about the other side of this, because a lot of people hear that number and think, that feels lower than what I could list it for.
And that's a fair reaction. But what really matters is what you walk away with after everything is said and done.
Right, because listing isn't free.
Exactly. If Lisa listed the house, she might need to spend that $40,000 up front on repairs. Then you've got around 6% in agent commissions, that's about $15,000, and additional closing costs.
And time.
That's the big one. In markets like Lancaster, York, and Harrisburg right now, homes can take a few months to sell, depending on condition and pricing. If you're carrying that property at, say, $2,500 a month, 6 months is another $15,000.
So the gap starts to shrink when you look at the full picture.
Exactly. Not always, but often. And that's why we always encourage homeowners to look at the net, not just the top-line number.
Let's bring in a real-world style example, because I think this is where people really connect.
Yeah, here's a situation we see quite often. Imagine a homeowner, we'll call him Dave, in Lancaster. He inherited a property that needed a decent amount of work.
That's a common one.
Very. Now, in his case, the house might have sold for around $220,000 if it were fully updated, but it needed closer to $60,000 in repairs, older systems, outdated layout, some structural concerns.
So, a bigger project.
Exactly. When we ran the numbers, his cash offer came in lower than what he initially expected. But here's the key. He didn't have the time, money, or desire to take on a $60,000 renovation.
So, even though the number wasn't as high, it still made sense for his situation.
Right. He avoided months of work, upfront costs, and uncertainty. For him, it was about simplicity and moving on.
That's a great example. Do you have one where the numbers actually worked out a little stronger for the seller?
Yeah, and this happens too. Imagine a homeowner, we'll call her Karen, in Harrisburg. Her property needed mostly cosmetic updates, paint, flooring, minor fixes.
So, not a full overhaul.
Exactly. The repair costs were lower, so the gap between a traditional sale and a cash offer was much smaller. In her case, once she factored in commissions, timeline, and the hassle of showings, the net difference wasn't as big as she expected.
So she chose certainty over squeezing out every last dollar.
Exactly. And that's really what this comes down to.
Let's clear up one big myth before we wrap up. Are cash buyers just throwing out random low offers?
No, legitimate cash buyers are using a consistent process based on market data, repair costs, and risk. It's not random, but it's also not identical from one property to another.
And it's not always the best option for everyone.
Correct. If your house is in great condition and you have time, listing with a realtor can absolutely make sense. We tell people that all the time.
So it really comes down to your situation.
Exactly. Your timeline, the condition of the property, your financial situation, and how much effort you want to put in.
All right, let's wrap this up. What are the key takeaways for homeowners across Lancaster, York, Harrisburg, Lebanon, and throughout central Pennsylvania?
First, cash offers are based on real numbers, market value, repairs, and holding costs. Second, every property is different, and offers can vary more than people expect. Third, it's not just about price. It's about certainty, speed, and simplicity.
And if someone's listening and thinking, I just want to know what my number would actually be, what should they do?
The best step is to get a real, no-obligation offer for your specific property. That gives you something concrete to compare against listing or renting.
No guessing.
Exactly. If you're a homeowner in Lancaster, York, Harrisburg, Lebanon, Reading, or even the greater Philadelphia region, and you want to understand what a cash offer might look like for your situation, you can call us at 717-321-SOLD or visit 717homebuyers.com.
No pressure, just a conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Central PA Property Talk podcast.
We'll see you next time.